We are back, class, and picking up with the Hayes administration and the issue of 16-1. Ever since the end of the Civil War, the farmers and Westerners had demanded more greenbacks in circulation. Greenbacks were money that was issued during the war to help pay for soldiers' salaries, pay for supplies, pay for whatever needed to be paid for. This is where the Union was simply cranking out money to pay bills. This, of course, caused inflation. You cannot continue to have this happen. As soon as the war is over, you stop the presses, and you have to start removing all of this quote-unquote funny money, these greenbacks, out of circulation. You have to make the currency sound again. You can't just run the presses and produce money. The farmers, Westerners, had loved this because with all of these greenbacks, they caused inflation, and they were paying off debts with this inflated money. And so previously, maybe they had bought land and owed $100 on it. And well, maybe they were getting for a crop each year, maybe $20. And so it was going to take quite a bit till they paid off that $100 for the land they had purchased. Well, when you have inflation, your product is still has value, but the funny money makes it more expensive. And so now you're charging $30, $35, but the bank is taking still the same amount. And so the farmer is paying his debts off very quickly. And so when the war was over and the government begins pulling out these greenbacks, the farmer, the Westerner, is screaming, "We want more greenbacks, we want more greenbacks." After 8 years of Grant, they realize this is a dead issue. It's not going to happen. And so they dropped this now for the new issue of the unlimited coinage of silver at the value ratio of 16 ounces of silver to every 1 ounce of gold. We only were on the gold standard. Gold was the only thing that backs U.S. currency at that time. Now they suddenly say, let's have a bimetallic system. Let's put silver in the U.S. Treasury along with gold. This, of course, was very advantageous to the Westerners because silver discoveries had been discovered out west. And this shot production up, and of course, supply and demand, lots of silver is available, the price will drop. So the gold standard versus bimetallicism, bi meaning two metals in the Treasury versus just the gold standard, would continue to battle on. Here, a poster showing that concept. Now, this is nothing close to 16-1. We never even ever got close to 16-1. But this one is proposing gold at 100 cents, $1, and silver in the Treasury to the amount of 65 cents. And here you can see the bicycle is not going to run correctly. Things just aren't aligned. Another poster showing the prosperity of silver. Should we have the silver bill and add silver into our economy? Here is Uncle Sam showing the blessings of putting silver into the United States economy. In God we trust. The farmer is going to do well. The merchants are going to do well. Just everybody is going to do well. The sunshine of prosperity will shine upon our nation. The gold standard versus bimetallicism battles on. A compromise was finally reached by Congress in the Bland-Allison Act of 1878. The Treasury would purchase from $2 to $4 million worth of silver bullion a month. Silver bullion. Bullion means cubes, like gold bars, silver bars. Remember the soup used to get in a jar, and those little cubes that were in gold little paper or was chicken bouillon, and in the red paper, metallic paper, was beef bouillon. Yeah, bouillon, cube shaped. The Treasury would purchase from $2 to $4 million worth of silver bullion a month and coin it into dollars, then worth only 93 cents intrinsically. So we're going to help out the West. We're going to start buying some of that excess silver. They were mining more silver than could be purchased. Nothing more wonderful than having a stable customer, the U.S. government. And the U.S. government promises we will buy from $2 to $4 million worth of silver bullion a month and coin it into dollars. Immediately, the value of the dollar drops. It is no longer worth $1. It is worth 93 cents intrinsically. We are going to leave the bimetallic issue behind. We will pick it up a little bit later. But for right now, we are going to leave it behind. And instead, we are going to go over to haze and foreign friction. Economic unrest sweeps to California. Here we have the west coast of the United States, Washington, Oregon, and California. And we are going to key in on California. The Chinese laborers in California counted 75,000, or 9% of the population. Now, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, areas, cities imported where foreigners would come in on the ships. Did they amount to 9% in these areas? Absolutely not. The percentage would be much higher. Out in the middle of nowhere, the percentages would be obviously much lower. But you have much higher concentrations in the cities than 9%. But for the whole population of California, it amounted to 9%. My father always said if a minority is 4% or less, they usually are not perceived as a problem. But as soon as a minority gets above about 4%, that is when the majority begins to say, hey, who is this? What is this? What is going on? How is this impacting on us? And they begin to notice the minority. And here you have 9%, and who knows what percent it was in such areas as San Francisco. Well, in San Francisco, violence arose against the competition of this cheap Chinese labor. Scores of harmless Orientals were abused in various ways, including the forcible cutting off of their precious pigtails. And here, cartoon says, this is Pacific chivalry, encouragement to Chinese immigration. Courts of justice closed to Chinese, extra taxes to yellowjacks. Yes, California here. We are not encouraging or wanting any more Chinese to come here. They were abused in various ways, including the forcible cutting off of their precious pigtails. Others were murdered outright. Even law-abiding citizens on the Pacific coast viewed the low-wage Chinese with alarm. The beef eater had no chance against the rice eater. And here you have the Chinese immigrant and the Californian with, of course, his, I don't know if that's a stick or a gun there, but at Frisco, let me tell you, natives don't call San Francisco, at least today, Frisco. You can always tell if someone is calling it Frisco that they are not from San Francisco. I lived right outside of San Francisco for quite a few years, and the people of San Francisco refer to their city as the city. I mean, could there be any other? The city. They don't refer to it as Frisco. But I have enlarged this down here, and the Californian, that's probably a stick because there's his gun. Yes. This Californian is saying to this Chinese immigrant, see here, me Chinese heathen, that's heathen, heathen. I'm one of the Committee of National Safety, and bringing to me mind the words of George O. Washington and Daniel O. Webster in regard to foreign influence, ye must go. Do ye understand? Ye must go. And the Qinghai Washi Man. Yes, we do not. You may wash our clothes, but we still don't appreciate you. The Chinese must go. Take your washing board and go back to China. Leave San Francisco and go. Take your money that you've been earning, your washing board, and be off. Congress passes in 1898 severe restrictions to the amount of incoming Chinese. President Hayes vetoes this on the grounds that it violates the existing treaty with China. No, Congress, you can't just pass any laws you want. If we have existing treaties with China, you cannot violate those treaties. 2 years later, in 1880, Congress slams the door on Chinese laborers for a period of 10 years with the Chinese Exclusion Act. Subsequent laws would bar the door completely until 1943. What happens in 1943? You have the fall of China to communism at the end of World War II. Incidentally enough, Hayes was the first one to set up a Chinese embassy in the United States. That occurred under his administration. And here he receives the first Chinese delegation. President Hayes here. And leaving the West Coast behind, we are moving on to Panama for a moment. Another hot spot developed over a possible canal to be dug through Panama under the dynamic leadership of the 74-year-old Ferdinand de Lesseps. He was the conqueror of the Isthmus of Panama, right here. The Isthmus of Suez, not Panama, the Isthmus of Suez. This was revolutionary. I don't have the map of the whole world here, but here's the Mediterranean, and here is the Middle East, and before this time, you had to go all the way around Africa and get to Asia. And now, with the digging of the Suez Canal, you could simply go from Europe to the Mediterranean and over to Asia. You saved yourself thousands and thousands of miles sailing all the way around Africa. Now, the Suez Canal was a very easy project. You were digging at sea level, no mountains, no major rivers, nothing, just a canal dug through the sand there, from one ocean to the other. Now a French company was organized to dig the Panama Canal. Many Americans felt that this was a French violation of the Monroe Doctrine. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, our fifth president, had issued the Monroe Doctrine, stating the era of colonization in the New World is over. Any colonies that had won independence from their French or any other colonizer, Dutch or Spanish in particular, if they had gained independence, they were free. The European power could not come back and recolonize. And any European power who wanted to come over and pick up a weak new republic could not. Era of colonization was over. Europe, you stay in your hemisphere. This is our hemisphere. We will stay in our hemisphere. We will not mess in European affairs. Two hemispheres, you stay in yours, we stay in ours. Well, suddenly now, the French are saying, we are going to come over in your hemisphere and we're going to dig the Panama Canal across Panama. From here, through the lake, and then over here, out to the Atlantic Ocean. So from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. We're going to do it. No. Violation of the Monroe Doctrine. This is our hemisphere. President Hayes, in a message to Congress in 1880, sternly warned that any future canal would be virtually a part of the coastline of the United States. If anyone's going to build it, we're going to build it. Undaunted, though, the French promoters began to make the dirt fly in Panama in 1883. But the audacious undertaking was crippled by various obstacles, especially yellow fever, which swept away thousands of workers and caused de Lesseps to be dubbed the Great Undertaker. What are the differences? Oh, the differences. This is the same sea level as this, the same sea level. This is nothing but a ditch. There's no mountains. There's no nothing. There is the huge Gatan Pass here. There are mountains that need to be gone through, that have to be dug. They spent years digging through the mountains in Panama. There's a lake here that swells during rainy season, and water levels that change. You have mountains here. This is not a sea level canal that can be dug. Also, this ocean is not the same level as this ocean. Had there have been a sea level canal, which could not be dug, but had there have been, one ocean would have constantly drained into the other ocean because they are not at the same level. When the United States will finally take over this project, we will do it the way we have done American canals all along. We used locking systems where you can go up in elevation and down in elevation through locks. But no. The French were trying to do it by a sea level canal. Bankruptcy finally overwhelmed the company in 1889. So within 9 years, they have, less than that time, 83 to 89. What is that, about 6 years' time? Amid shattered financial scandals, the jungle vines rapidly smothered its rusting machinery. What Hayes could not prevent, nature did. By the time the U.S. under Teddy Roosevelt will finally take over the program and we will build the canal, the Spanish-American War will have taken place, and we will have figured out the cause of yellow fever. And we will go in first and we will clean up the disease situation. The French workers, died like flies by the thousands. As fast as you could bring in the workers, they died. And so we knew we could not have the same thing happening. So we cleaned up the mosquito problem to put a curb on yellow fever. Then we brought in our workers, and we will have a completely different end result than the French did. In summing up Hayes's administration, he brought to his exalted office a high degree of patriotism, conscientiousness, and devotion to duty. He helped to make reform respectable. His signal contribution was to show that a Republican could be inflexibly honest and also resistant to designing friends. This was very needed after 8 years of the Grant administration. And, on D2L, I have a biography on each of the presidents. You will read the biography on Rutherford, there it went again, Rutherford B. Hayes. Here is the wedding picture of good old young Rutherford and his wife, Lucy. When you read the biography, his wife, Lucy, is known in the White House as Lemonade Lucy. To this day, she is known as Lemonade Lucy. Someday on Jeopardy, you will know the answer to the question, which First Lady is known as Lemonade Lucy? Why is Mrs. Rutherford B. Hayes known as Lemonade Lucy? Read that on D2L and know the answer. He and his wife had 9 children. The last one died at a year old. They had 8 boys and 1 girl. Oh, that poor little girl. All those boys. She was either a horrible tomboy or horribly spoiled with all those brothers. Well, in this picture, obviously, all the brothers are not there. Here's a picture of a family. They obviously like to play tennis because we've got at least 3 rackets here. I don't know how much of the family this is or if there's other relatives involved here, but I'm sure we've got in-laws and outlaws and all of whatnot there. Here right after the Civil War, 68, when he is serving as governor. And here with 2 of his sons, I tell you, they are the same height, those 2 boys. Look at the faces, identical. Those 2 look like twins. I have no idea if he had twins, but boy, do those 2 boys look the same. Another picture of part of his family, and once again, they do like to play tennis. There's another racket there. We got 4 rackets in that picture. So, and there is Rutherford. Picture of him as a young man. Once again, he served in the Civil War with distinction. And house in Ohio. Ooh, nice big house with that many kids. I'm glad he can afford to have a big house. Nice house. And as president, we have stamps of every single president. Some have more stamps of them than other presidents do. And Liberia has 1 or 2 series of stamps of our presidents as well. Liberia is a country in Africa formed during the Monroe administration, Return to Africa movement. The capital of Liberia is Monrovia, named after President Monroe. The only country in the world to have a capital named after a U.S. president. And some stamps of President Hayes. And the second lecture you will be reading on D2L for test number 1 is all about Booker T. Washington. So please, before test number 1, read the D2L lecture on him. He was very interested in education, and he will found Tuskegee Institute, and his students, he believed in his students working on the property. He worked at a college to earn his keep. He had no money to pay for his education, and so he worked at the college, and so he believed in having his students do work at the college as well, and so they helped build the buildings. He, besides education, also believed in the trades training. So here, some kind of class where they're learning some type of trade. Another class where they're learning education. This one to me also looks like a trade class where they're learning architecture, or whether they're learning newspaper printing or something. I'm not sure exactly what type of class this is, but I'm assuming this is some kind of a trade class. And then another academic type class here. And here you've got females as well as males in the class. This one looked like it was all males, but here you have males and females in this one. And Tuskegee as it looks today. Very prestigious looking. And his autobiography, Up from Slavery. And on the grounds there, statue of Booker T. Washington. Believed in education, as did Du Bois, but they will have other beliefs that cause them to go separate ways. He, with his family, 2 sons and 1 daughter, a bit older, the 2 sons and the daughter. And this gentleman, I do not know who that is. But of course, we've got Big Bill Taft, our president. We've got Booker T. Washington and Andrew Carnegie. Or Carnegie, I'm never sure how that is exactly pronounced. And stamps. We've got, I'm assuming, his birthplace. He was born a slave. And here, a stamp of Booker T. Washington. I do not see a year on it. And Tuskegee, no longer institute, but university. And Michelle Obama. I'm sure she's giving some kind of a speech or graduation, or this does look like graduation here. Probably a graduation speaker. And the next election, the election of 1888. At the convention, Republicans were split into 2 factions. They finally left their leaders behind and stampeded to a dark horse. Dark horse meaning an unknown, someone who did not come to the convention planning on running for the president. Their dark horse candidate is James A. Garfield from Ohio, that new modern mother of presidents. Upon attending the convention, Garfield had no idea he would be chosen, but the party being split into factions, the stalwarts and the half-breeds. What a name, half-breeds, stalwarts and the half-breeds. Finally, a compromise was reached. Garfield, a congressman from the important state of Ohio, and a half-breed would be the party's candidate for president. And Chester A. Arthur. Remember, he had just been booted out by Hayes from collector of the port of New York. A stalwart would be the party's nominee for vice president. And let's go to a campaign poster here. We've got Farmer Garfield swinging his sigh for honesty, ability, and patriotism, going to make his way to Capitol Hill. And the Grand National Republican banner of 1880, Garfield and Chester A. Arthur. Garfield enjoyed numerous assets. Born in Ohio and in a log cabin, he had worked his way up from poverty by driving mules on the towpaths of the Ohio Canal. What is driving mules on the towpaths of the Ohio Canal? We had canals in the United States. The Ohio Canal, you dig a ditch. It doesn't have to be real deep. And you have flat-bottom barges. Before, you would have to have wagons that horses, mules, oxen would pull. Now, because there's very little friction with water, you could load quite a bit of goods on these flat-bottom barges, and instead of a whole team of animals pulling them, with little friction, you could have one or two horses or mules pulling all that weight. You didn't even have to have towpaths on both sides. Usually there was towpaths only on one side. You ran a rope from your barge to an animal, and well, how are you going to make your animal keep going? All you needed was someone to lead that animal. Didn't even need an adult, as long as you had a kid who was willing to work for a few cents per mile to walk that animal up. Maybe it was 10 miles or 20 miles you would contract. Then he would contract with another person to walk 10, 20 miles back home. And so he earned his living as a kid, very poor kid, walking mules on the Ohio towpaths. He also had served effectively as a volunteer officer in the Civil War. He had finally risen to the ranks of Major General. So, once again, another Civil War veteran. His platform was emphatically for the protective tariff. We are going to protect Northern Republican industry from cheap European goods, and somewhat feebly for civil service reform. All right, and our Democratic opponent, Winfield S. Hancock. Hancock the Superb. Good-looking officer. So here we have two military men. Two military men, both with excellent reputations. And the Democrats turned to the tall and handsome General Winfield S. Hancock. Hancock the Superb. Their nominee was a West Pointer. You don't get better than West Point. He had served brilliantly in the Civil War, especially at Gettysburg, where he had been wounded. His nomination refuted the common charge that only Republican officers had fought for the North. Here he was a Democrat, and he had fought for the North. He was also popular in the South. The solid South is solidly Democrat, yet he had fought for the North. Well, why would he be popular in the South? Because he had fair-mindedly handled one of the military reconstruction districts. We didn't cover that, but under Grant, the South is divided into 5 military reconstruction districts, and each is handled by a northern military general. And Hancock was one of those generals. And while he was a Northerner, he was very fair-minded in dealing with the South. And so the South liked and appreciated him. The Democratic platform declared for civil service reform. Hey, how do all these people get their jobs? We need to clean up the system. We need to make sure that people are receiving their jobs who deserve their jobs. And they said, we are not going to protect northern, mainly Republican industry. We are going to have a tariff for revenue only, not a protective tariff. We need a tariff, yes, because the government uses the tariff to run things. That was the main source of income for the United States government at that time, was the tariff. So yes, we need a tariff. But why raise the tariff to a higher level to protect northern industry from cheaper European goods? A tariff only for what we need, not for northern protection. For revenue only. Well, they call their candidate Hancock the Good, the Superb, and the bird to bet on. Beautiful Hancock. Well, the opposition has some other views. Yes, you have Hancock the Superb. And Hancock, cock-a-doodle-doo. That's their version of This is the Republican version of Hancock. Hancock, cock-a-doodle-doo. And they say on September 2nd, obviously that was the first Tuesday in November, which would have been Election Day in 1880. Hancock, boo-hoo-hoo. They show him as one skinny, one plucked, one bleeding, disastrous bird. The Republicans raised a lush campaign fund by assessing office holders a percentage of their salaries as job insurance. So they said, hey, the Democrats, if they win, are going to do civil service reform. So all those of you who have gotten your job by the good old boy system, if the Democrats win, you're going to lose your job. So you either give campaign contributions now to help the Republicans win, pay now or pay later when you lose your job when the Democrats win. So they assessed them a percentage of their salaries as job insurance. They also fried the fat out of huge corporations as tariff insurance. What they said was, you're enjoying protection because the Republicans are in. We have the tariff walls high to protect you. If the Democrats get in, they're going to lower the tariff walls, which means you're going to have to lower your prices because you're going to be competing against cheap European goods. So pay now to the Republican campaign chest so you make sure a Republican wins, or pay later when you have to drop your prices because the Democrats won. So tariff insurance. Garfield barely scraped by with only 9,464 more popular votes than Hancock's. Look it, there was 9 million votes cast, and he wins by only 9,000. But once again, you don't win in the popular. Yes, he does win in the popular by 9,000 votes. You win in the electoral. And here he wins by quite a margin, 58% to 42%, 214 electoral votes to 155. And once again, the solid South votes solidly Democrat. Once again, all this tan, you're saying, why aren't they voting? Territories don't vote. You don't get to vote until you're a state. So one of the good reasons to become a state, so you do get a chance to vote. Prior to that time, no voting privileges. And the inauguration of Garfield. Here you have Garfield and his wife, and the outgoing Hayes and Lemonade Lucy here. And a drawing of Garfield being sworn in. Some more drawings. Here's Garfield taking the oath of office. And the inaugural ball. And here you have Garfield and his wife. Once again, you win in the even year, but you didn't take office until March of the odd year. Still today, win in the even, take office in the odd. January, now though, of the odd. Back then, March of the odd. And he and his wife at the inaugural ball. Garfield was elected by a very slim margin, and now office seekers line up for federal jobs. 4 months into office, March, April, May, June, July. July 2nd, barely into July. July 2nd, 1881. The president was getting ready to board a train. He was pacing briskly, walking back and forth on the train platform when a man, Charles J. Gittu, draws a pistol and fires 2 shots. Oops. Bang, bang! He shoots from behind at the president. Wait, I did that 3 times. 2 times. The president falls to his knees. So Gittu shoots him from behind. He's been pacing back and forth here in the lobby waiting to get on the train, and he falls to his knees. Falls to his knees and crumples down. In falling, he sort of contorts and twists his body into a weird sort of a way. One bullet hasn't hit him at all. It has grazed his coat. Yes, it got his coat, but it didn't get him. The other one has lodged in his lower right side. A doctor on the platform uses his finger to try and trace the path of the bullet. Unfortunately, he doesn't wash his hands, and he doesn't, because of the way the president's body is contorted, he doesn't come close to even following the path of the bullet. Instead, with his finger, he makes his own new path into the president's body. He does not find the bullet, and the president is then taken back to the White House. The president was quite a sturdy and muscular, healthy man. The doctors operate with unsterilized instruments, and they do not find the bullet. Unfortunately, though, the wound does become infected. Had they have left the poor man alone, he would have lived. But they kept cutting and prodding. They kept thinking, we gotta find this bullet. We have to get it out of him. And they didn't understand germs. It was sweltering hot that summer in the Washington area, and he is just day after day. The nation loved him, and well-wishers were sending him cans, jars of their grandma's chicken noodle soup. Everyone was wanting him to get well. And had he have had even a different doctor, he was so stuck on his doctor, who was not the best doctor, but he tenaciously stuck to this man. This guy's going to be my doctor. He would have also probably lived. Alexander Graham Bell even comes to the White House to try and help the president. And there's an article on D2L that you will read about Alexander Graham Bell trying to cure the president with his induction balance device. He has created this new device, and in all of their cutting and probing, they are certain that that bullet is in this area on the president. And that's where they keep cutting and probing, and it's all black and blue, and they know it's there. And Alexander Graham Bell takes his induction balance device and he runs it over that black and blue area, and sure enough, every time he goes over that area, it hums. They even bring Mrs. Garfield in, and they run it over that area, and she listens, and it hums. Unfortunately, the president dies. What else was it? Something else I was going to tell you. Okay, forgot. Oh, the whole nation is praying for him. Here, an example of a poster put up for a prayer meeting. A meeting for prayer for the recovery of the health of the president to be held at the Methodist Church Thursday, September 8th at 10:30 a.m. Business will be suspended from 10 to 12 in the factories and other business places as requested by the governor. I'm not sure which state this is, but the governor of whatever state this was from, the whole state was having 2 hours of prayer for the president, and all businesses were closed for those 2 hours. The nation was very upset about this. Unfortunately, the president does die on September 19th of blood poisoning. Had they have left him alone, he probably would have lived, because the bullet had become encapsulated in a cyst. He died of blood poisoning because they kept poking and prodding him with unsterilized instruments. When autopsy is done, they find out all this black and blue area is not where the bullet is. It is on the exact opposite side of the body. So why did the induction balance device that Alexander Graham Bell invented hum when it was over the black and blue area? Well, what they have finally figured out was the president was on one of those newfangled beds, a coil spring bed. And what they have figured out is there was probably one of those big old metal coils right under the spot where they were going. And he was picking up the hum of the coil underneath, not that itty-bitty little bullet over here. While his induction balance device does not save the president's life, the military has since found great use for this machine. And They use it to this day as a mine detector, and it has probably saved tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of lives, and it is used all over the world as a metal detector, mine detector. Charles J. Gattu, cartoon of the time period. Once again, why did he shoot the president? Let's go back. Come on, let's go back here. What is going on? Come on. We're going the wrong way. Hang on, hang on. Hang on. Come on. Nope. I'm trying to get it. Okay. All this hassle just for this. I lost it again. Come on, come on. All right. Remember that half-breed and stalwart? Gattu was a stalwart, and he had made a couple of attempts to get in to see Garfield to get a job. He was an office seeker, and he hadn't gotten in to see Garfield. And now he felt Chester A. Arthur is president, and he is a stalwart, and I am a stalwart, and now I shall get a job. Well, let me tell you, he may be a stalwart and you may be a stalwart, but when you have just killed the president, you don't get a government job. So cartoon and office for your life. Yeah. And Charles J. Gattu was who assassinated U.S. President Garfield intentionally used a gun that would look nice in a museum. He knew what he was up to, and he even planned ahead. I'm going to become famous, and this gun is going to be displayed in a museum, etc. He was tried for murder and pleaded insanity, but the jury found him sane and guilty. He was executed by hanging, and a drawing of his execution. He was obviously up here, the floor was let out, and he dropped to his death. And the president he killed, James A. Garfield. He has a state funeral, president, obviously, whether they die in office or after leaving office, they are allowed a funeral at the Capitol building where they lay in state and mourners can come by to see the president. And then, of course, they have funeral in the Capitol. Incidentally enough, usually the only people who ever have a funeral in the Capitol are presidents. But every once in a while, a special privilege will be granted to someone who is not a president. And in the last couple of years, we have had two. Senator John McCain had served years in Congress, had run for the presidency, had served in Vietnam, was very badly injured, and held as a POW for quite a few years in Vietnam. He was honored with a Capitol funeral, and very, very recently, Congressman John Lewis, who was very active in the civil rights movements, He was also honored with a capital funeral. So usually only presidents, but every once in a while someone will be given the high honor who is not a president of also having a capital funeral. The White House was draped in black in mourning for his death. And then, of course, the procession, the casket leaves the White House. His tomb in Ohio. You're saying he was only president for a couple of half a year, 6 months. Man, what a tomb. Now, this is not something he built. His family probably didn't even build this. I am sure the state of Ohio, city of Cleveland or whatever, built this in honor of him. And he and his wife in the mausoleum there, these are urns. I don't think they cremated back then. You've got the caskets. Maybe, I don't know what this is, but President and his wife in quite a tomb. And he and his wife Lucretia, he looked so much better in his later years. Man, that looks scary. Their engagement or wedding picture, even there, he still looks a bit on the rough side. Now, she looks very pretty, but it looks, oh, wow, man. Yes, much better. He ages well, let's just say it that way. 5 Garfield children, 1 boy and 1 girl died, which left only 1 girl living with the rest boys. And I don't know whether this is from his side or her side, but obviously 1 parent still living in this picture with one of his daughters. Whether the one that died or the one that's still living, I don't know. And the 5 living children. And 2 pictures of Garfield. And he's honored in front of the Capitol with quite a large statue for such a short term in office. And homes, once again, not uncommon for a president to have more than 1 home during their lifetime. Nice house. Hey, I'd take either one. Oops. And stamps of President Garfield. And 2 from 2 different series from Liberia. Thus ends James A. Garfield, the man.